Welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz, a bi-weekly program on KSKD 90.7 FM. I'm your host for today, Mathilde Rand. My guest is Patricia Kimie, and we will discuss green burial. In short, green burial is defined as a way of caring for the dead with minimal environmental impact that aids in the conservation of natural resources, reduction of carbon emissions, protection of worker health, and the restoration and/or preservation of habitat. But there's more to it, so here to discuss is Patricia Kimie. She's a funeral pre-planning specialist and green burial advocate for a local funeral home, Benito and Asaro. She has been helping families navigate through the many funeral and cremation options since 2015. What she enjoys most is educating the community on what a green burial is and the options that are considered natural. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you so much for having me, Mathilde.
You're welcome. So let's start talking a little bit about why people make pre-arrangements with you.
Well, that is a great question, Mathilde. And it boils down to two categories. I would say it's those who do and those who don't. So first I'll start with those who do make pre-arrangements. And I like to say that as a pre-arrangement counselor, I work as that person's advocate. So they have the benefit of taking the time to make good financial and clear decisions for themselves. The family won't have any doubts wondering what their wishes were, and they'll be able to set things up exactly the way they want. Some of my clients are pretty creative too, especially here in Santa Cruz. They want a certain poem read or a certain song played or maybe a certain flower to go into their cremation box or their burial casket. So it's also a way to complete their estate planning. It's amazing how many people spend so much time and money to put their will and trust and estate plan together, but they don't finish this other piece. So those that do feel like they completed their estate plan. And I would say the last is that it relieves the family of any financial burden left, along with the emotional decisions that they have to make. So those are those who do make the pre-arrangements. And those who don't make pre-arrangements, well, they're not the recipients of that. The recipients now are left with the burden. They're left with some decisions to be made. Unfortunately, I've seen many families who have just lost a loved one come into our office, a place where they've never been before. They have to speak with someone that they've never spoken to before and answer about 75 to 100 questions, and they really don't want to be there. It's a very emotional time, and it's just so much easier when it's done. And what's interesting is those people who did experience that coming into the office and making those arrangements usually call me within a few months saying, I don't want my kids to go through what I just went through. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and if I think about myself, I'm getting older, and so that's one of the reasons I think why I do this program, because my time will come. Everybody's time will come. And I know with my husband, when he passed away, he could not make arrangements.
Okay.
He was unable to do that. He couldn't speak.
Right.
And so, I did yes and no questions. And it was very traumatic to talk with because, A, he wasn't going to die in his mind. And I knew what the doctor said. So it can be very difficult for families. I have the opportunity to make pre-arrangements, so at some point I may do that. So thank you for being here and illuminating me and hopefully our listeners. What are the options we have in Santa Cruz?
So in Santa Cruz County, you have the traditional cremation or burial options. And burial, I mean in the ground or say in a mausoleum. There is one other option that is a legal option in Santa Cruz that a lot of people don't know about, and that is at-sea full-body burial. Mm-hmm. You can have your body out in the sea. Now, not like the pirates. We're not going to put you on a raft and light it up on fire or anything like that. But we do work with a local company out in the harbor, the Sea Spirit Memorial, and they do offer this option. Now, of course, our waters are very highly protected. It is a sanctuary, so it's a very long day. It's 33 miles out to a location in the waters where that is a legal option. And that's something that I just recently started to promote this year. Mm-hmm. Basically, the body is shrouded and then taken to the harbor where they would attach rocks to weigh the body down, and then the body is taken out. It's like a 12-hour trip up and back. So that's one other option.
It's a true voyage.
Absolutely.
It's very meaningful, yeah. And then so here on Earth, you said cremation and regular burial, but there's probably some variations in that too.
There are. I'm glad that you asked. So in the state of California last year, aquamation, which is called alkaline hydrolysis, and what that is cremation by water, was legalized. Unfortunately, though, like anything, there's regulations that need to be made and rules and probably certifications that need to be earned to be able to do that process. So it really hasn't been an option in the state until recently, and I'm looking into one option right now that's being done in Southern California. So basically what that means is in a traditional cremation, the body is taken to the crematory, and the body undergoes high temperatures, about 1,400 to 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. And in a water cremation, the body is placed into some sort of like a tube or a vessel where water is placed. And then the temperature goes up to about 400 to 600 degrees. So it's a little bit, say, gentler of an option. The funny thing, I guess it's not funny, but I was told that for people who have metal hips, in a fire cremation, those metal pieces are completely destroyed, even though we do recycle them. But in a water cremation, those metal hips are polished and actually can be reused.
That is amazing.
It is. And
so that's another way of giving a body part to somebody else.
That's correct. That's correct. A little bit less waste in our world. And I do hope that that option becomes available closer to home, and I'll keep you updated on that. And the other option that recently became a legal option in California is human composting. And I'm not talking about something in your backyard, but this is a process where the body is placed into a vessel, and they call it a laying in, like you put the body on a tray with organic materials, and then the vessel is closed, and with a controlled amount of oxygen and heat, the body will decompose. The process takes about 60 days. Even though it was just made a legal option, it's really not going to happen for many years. They're saying 2027 is when they'll get all the regulations down in writing, but a company still has to come out to make that something that we do here.
So I got to hold on for a little longer.
If that's what you want.
Option.
That's correct.
So that's another thing when you come for the pre-arrangement. I mean, the options that are available, very careful planning of what is going to happen when.
That is true. And I actually have a few people that want to be on a waiting list because they do want to know these other options that come up. And if they're still around, they might have even more options.
Now, I understand that in California, a home burial, that's, you talk about the backyard and all that.
Right.
But a home burial or a burial on people's property, family's property, is not allowed. Why is that?
It's a real estate issue. It has nothing to do with the funeral industry. So in this country, this getting buried in your backyard, so to speak, is not a legal option in California, the state of Washington, or Indiana. So imagine all the other states that are left that do offer this option. It's still a very controlled thing to do, though. I read up on this, and the states that do allow this option are mainly happening in rural areas. So there are regulations like the body needs to be so many feet away from a fence or another building or the water table or electrical lines. And if it ever does become legal in California, I'm sure it would only be happening in very rural areas. So that's not happening here in Santa Cruz.
No, because we're kind of full. With houses and roads.
And it's a legal disclosure. If you are going to bury someone in your backyard in the states that it is legal, you have to actually create that area as a zoned cemetery. So imagine all of that's involved.
Now, that is fascinating. I hear you, tell you there's this and there's that, fences and spaces and all that.
Right.
There's a lot of regulation then.
There are. They have to regulate it, or else someone would be burying mom right outside their porch. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. Just not yet.
That also brings me to, I did a little bit of research on the internet about green burial, and there was frequently asked questions. Again, there were regulations, and there were questions like, well, isn't the body going to pollute the water table? So the answer was no, because you're about 3-4 feet, and the water table is usually like 75 feet. So there's a lot of things that will go in people's mind when they choose it. So maybe people can keep that in mind when you're explaining to us what is green burial.
Well, green burial, what that really means is a natural option for the disposition of the body. The body is not embalmed. The body would be placed in a biodegradable container, so no metal caskets. The biodegradable containers could include something like a shroud, basket, casket made of willow or bamboo or seagrass, something like that, or a pine box. And there are no metal vaults or no concrete vaults involved. So if you're going to be having a green burial out to sea, you would be in a natural shroud, and there's no metal casket involved there. If you go to a cemetery, and I think we'll be talking about that shortly, you would not be in a metal casket or embalmed.
So that's one part of why it's called green, because we're not putting anything in nature that is unnatural, such as concrete, metal.
Exactly.
Yeah. It reminds me, my husband was Jewish, and
Okay.
so he was buried in a pine box.
Right.
That was a pretty green burial then.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because in the Jewish faith, they are exercising a green burial. The body is not embalmed. The body is bathed and shrouded and then placed into a pine box. And the body needs to be buried within a very short period of
Yes.
time as well. And typically in a cemetery that is green, there is no concrete vault.
No.
So, yes, he
No.
did have a green burial
Yeah.
without you even really knowing that.
I didn't know that. And of course, it's sad to go through burials, but
Yes.
I feel good about where he is and how he was buried. So I want to remind people that they're listening to Exploring Santa Cruz on KSQD 90.7 FM or online at ksqd.org. My guest is Patricia Kimie, and we're discussing the green burial option. But why really would we want to choose for a green
Why would
burial?
we want green burial? You know, it really is a personal preference. There are some people who believe that cremation is the way to go, and that green burial is still utilizing lots of effort to put into, say, making a shroud or making the transportation to the cemetery, say. But most green burial advocates don't want to leave a big carbon footprint. Most are wanting a more environmentally friendly way to go. And what's interesting about this is every single person, there's no exception, every single client that I have that has chosen green burial has chosen this for themselves, their personal passion. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, say 2018, when I first started promoting this, most of my clients were saying to me, I have taken from the earth, I want to give back to the earth. Or I've taken from the sea and I want to give back to the sea. Lately, it has been, well, I'm a hiker or I'm a gardener. I love being out in nature. I just want to be with nature again. And then, of course, there's the environmental side of that. Yeah. I personally, along with my partner, have chosen green burial. And we actually have our burial plots as well in a green burial cemetery. So I am walking the walk.
Now, you also talked a little bit about embalming. Why is there no embalming in green burial?
So embalming of the body involves, without going into details, replacing the bodily fluids with a very highly toxic fluid called formaldehyde. And that is just not natural. Our forefathers didn't do this. You know, people say green burial is the new movement. It really isn't. It's bringing about how we used to do things many, many, many centuries ago. Mm-hmm. But I did recently discover that there is a green embalming fluid that has been created. However, it really still goes against the philosophy of not disturbing the body in its total completion, not removing anything from the body. And it really is only used, say, for example, someone came into the funeral home's care a little bit late, so was not handled efficiently, like refrigerated properly or in a good amount of time to preserve the body, mainly for a viewing. Most of my green burials, there's no viewing. It really is just a graveside service.
I had read about the possible green embalming,
Right.
but I hear what you're saying. You already talked a little bit about the baskets and no concrete and all. What products are suitable for a green burial?
The products would be, like I mentioned, the shrouds. So I have worked with natural shrouds, natural cotton shrouds, denim shrouds for all the men out there that like to wear their jeans, silk shrouds for those ladies or guys who, want something a little bit more elegant. Mm-hmm. And then we have several casket options made out of willow or bamboo. There are also linen shrouds. I forgot about that one. And then, of course, the pine box. So anything that's biodegradable will be suitable.
So does the body degrade quicker than those products? Or is it about the same?
That's a good question. Well, of course, when you're talking about a pine box, it's going to take a lot longer than a natural cotton shroud. Mm-hmm. And if you were to go to a true green burial cemetery where there is no concrete vault, you would notice that what's left after the body is buried into the ground, there is a mound left. And sometimes it's about maybe 4 feet high up. So, and I noticed that the stronger the material, say the pine box or the basket casket, the higher the mound, because you have that different entity surrounding the body that raises the dirt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and it does take longer to biodegrade.
And so the mound will go down as...
Yes, the mound slowly goes down to meet the earth as if nothing happened.
It is amazing, amazing. You talked about cemeteries. So I assume there are cemeteries for the green burials. And where are they in Santa Cruz County?
In Santa Cruz County, all of the cemeteries offer some sort of a green option, except for Holy Cross Cemetery on 7th Avenue. And when I say green option, what that means, and we call it a combination cemetery, what that means is you may choose to be buried, you're unembalmed, and you're in a natural shroud, and you're buried in the plot, but next to you can be an embalmed body in a metal casket. So that's called a combination cemetery. And the combination cemeteries are Soquel Cemetery, and that's off of Old San Jose Road in Soquel. Mm-hmm. There's Felton Cemetery, but there are some rules about qualifying to purchase there. And I'm now going to be looking at the Oddfellows Cemetery in Boulder Creek. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hoping to add that to my list. The more conventional cemeteries, and I say conventional because they're more pristine, would be Santa Cruz Memorial Park in Oakwood. They offer a green burial option where you still have to purchase the vault. Imagine a box like the concrete vault, but the bottom is missing. So the body is literally touching the ground. Now, for most people who believe in green burial, that wouldn't really meet their profile. Right. But some people have family that might be buried there, so that would be enough to satisfy their needs. My favorite, of course, and I'm partial to it, is Purísima Cemetery, which is located in Half Moon Bay, and that is a true green-only cemetery. It's a historic cemetery, which is kind of very, very fascinating to view in itself.
It's a beautiful view.
It is. You get the ocean view without the $1 million price tag.
Talk about real estate.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So what's the process of arranging for a green burial? How do people go about it?
The first thing I usually like to do is speak with people over the phone just to get a feel of, number one, how much do they already know? And if they don't, then I kind of fill in those blanks. Mm-hmm. Where did they live? Do they have any family that was buried in the county? Because sometimes if they do, they would want to stay in that vicinity.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I give them an option. I give them the names of the cemeteries based on our conversation, and I say, go check them out. Request a tour or go and walk the grounds yourself, because every cemetery has its own character, has its own, I guess you can call it, vibe when you walk on the grounds. It's like walking into a home when you're choosing your home. You either like it or you don't. You feel right or you don't feel right. Once the person does decide on a cemetery, then I meet with them and discuss the process of what the funeral home does for the person in the family. And sometimes people choose to do it the other way around. They want to meet me first, get all the information, especially those people who are very analytical. They get all the information, and then they take the steps that are most suitable for them.
When people want to contact you, you gave me some contact information. You have a website called Pre-Plan with Patricia, all one word.
That's correct.
preplanwithpatricia.com. And they also can call you at 831-756-1381. I understand that you do some tours with people.
I do.
And that they're even fun.
Yes, they are fun. So we offer at least 2 to 3 tours a month to tour the Green Burial Cemetery at Parisima. And I say it's fun because I've gone with several families to go to, say, other cemeteries to choose plots for a loved one. And it's usually not a very fun experience. No. It's a very sad one. No. And there's something different about this property. You walk on the property and it's like playing out in like when you were a kid. People actually run on the property. People are taking selfies on the property. And we actually have a good time. Some people bring a lunch to have lunch on the property. It's a very unique experience, and so unique, like I said earlier, that my partner and I decided to purchase our own plots there.
Could I kind of identify it as finding a new home?
Yes.
And finding a new community, even though there's not a lot of communication going on, but beforehand, planning, you become part of that community.
Absolutely. For all of, I call them my families, and that's a very common term we use, say, in the funeral business, is you're my family. Mm-hmm. And when someone chooses a plot there, I always say, welcome to the family, and we'll be together in the afterlife.
And now, finally, by researching this and talking with you, I'm beginning to understand when a good friend of mine and my husband's, she passed away, and before she died, she and her husband took me to where she was going to be buried.
Right.
And I was a little bit unsure about what to think about it, because at the same time that I was extremely sad that she was going to be gone soon, within the next month or so. But she wanted me, and she said, this is the place I chose. And it was actually in SoCal, and it was under a tree.
Right.
But it did her so much good to show me where she thought she was going to go. And I think it helped her in her process of transitioning. And it never dawned on me. I think I understood it a little bit at that point. But now I understand it even better. Because I sometimes think about her over there under that tree. Mm-hmm. And that she, in the end, was extremely happy. She was settling into her new home. And I finally begin to understand that. And I guess you have that a lot.
Yes, you're making me smile right now. I know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, every time we go to Parisima, we bring rocks that we find when we take our beach walks, and we're outlining our cemetery. We're like decorating our plots. So that's something that's very common there. Even if it's something that someone doesn't choose, I highly recommend people visit.
So there's a few more moments that we have. We have a minute or so. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you or we haven't touched upon that you think our listeners would like to know?
Wow, that's a really good question. There's so much that we already covered. I think, if anything, be prepared and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of this. It shouldn't be a fearful discussion or topic. I can say that the majority of people who I have spoken with have walked into my office a little bit fearful. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is usually when I see couples, one of them feels like they were dragged in. But that person ends up asking the most questions. And when they walk out their door, they thank me. They say, I am so relieved to get this done. And most people say it was actually fun because I try to make it a fun thing.
It's part of life.
Exactly, and accept that.
Many cultures do see it as part of life. So you're a guide.
That's correct.
You see yourself as a guide?
I do.
And that's why you take the tours with people?
Exactly. And I really enjoy it.
Well, this is fascinating, Patricia. So, listeners, this was Exploring Santa Cruz. I was speaking with Patricia Kimie about green burial. If you want to contact Patricia, her website is preplanwithpatricia.com, and she's available by phone at 831-756-1381. And Patricia, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. It was very enjoyable speaking with you.
I learned something.
Oh, good.
Okay.
That's the most important part.